patterns that have been consistent and consistently endorsed, which sort of consistently endorse a particular pattern of growth. Asia's big story, and although there's sort of a lot of Western money, I mean, to use a crude phrase, which has come into Asia over the last decade and a half, both from China and from the other economies, including India. Asia's story seems to be, and I'm not going to go into the sort of the nuances of this, because there are a complex story. But one of the things that economists believe about Asia is that the precondition for growth, or a takeoff in growth, is a rise in domestic savings. So Asia, I mean, despite all the foreign funding that it gets, it's ultimately Asia's growth, in a sense, is a play on how much they can save and invest. Yeah, and I'll sort of substantiate this in the next thing. So one of the things that sort of encourages people about India is that, well, it's attractive foreign capital. But if you look at the red and the black lines, it tells you that India is sort of now following the Asian trajectory, the Asian path, where there's been a sharp rise in domestic savings. The domestic savings, I told you, economists believe, at least for Asia, is a precondition for a takeoff in sustained high growth. And that's the problem. And how do I sort of, and this sort of, again, tells you what happened in other Asian economies. If you just look at economies that really picked up, the so-called Asian tiger, the red line is the 1980s, and 2000 is obviously the previous decade. That's the blue bar. You will notice that countries that really took off into high growth saw a significant jump in their savings rate. With the exception of Indonesia, which sort of, and it's really funny because Indonesia, in a sense, in the 90s and the early 2000s, just virtually fell off the map. There was no investment in India, in Indonesia, for a very long time. And there is a tendency to sort of blame this on issues like corruption. I mean, Indonesia was known to be one of the most corrupt states in Asia. But there seems to be a deeper story there, which is sort of consistent with what I told you economists say, that it's really, I mean, growth and growth potential is really a play on whether countries can put together enough domestic savings or not. And that seems to be a consistent thing. So India, if you just go back to the previous slide, is kind of going that way. It's got seen a sharp move up in that black line there, which is savings. And I have an assistant who is extremely fond of drawing very complex charts, especially these things with dots all over the place. But I'm just going to tell you what this is about. Please don't get intimidated by this. What it tells you is that roughly, this is the line, the black line relates savings to growth. What it tells you is that if an economy in Asia, and this is data taken from the last few decades for countries put together, if an economy manages to cross the 30% domestic growth savings rate, 30% of GDP if an economy saves, it sort of starts moving to a phase where the rate of growth itself picks up. So it sort of takes off if the 30% savings rate is crossed. And that's sort of an established fact for Asian economies put together. And in China there, if you want to see what thought about the China story, and you want to relate to the savings explanation, China is right up there. perhaps they're saving a little too much for their own good because they should be consuming. But China's humongous growth rate has been underpinned by very, very high domestic savings. And today, India has crossed this threshold. It's got past that 20% mark. And its sort of savings rate is progressively increasing. For those of you who are in the financial sector, either in banking or insurance, or in equities, portfolio management, who are interested in looking at India, and this is what a lot of companies, both American and British and European, are looking at, is this potential. I mean, if you have a large increase in domestic savings, right, there is a huge potential for sort of matching the rise in savings with the demand for investment, right? So there's a huge demand for intermediation which is creeping in through bond markets, through equity markets, through plain vanilla banking, through insurance. So it's one clear business opportunity that comes out of this saving story is the huge potential development of India's financial market. And if you are interested in this, let me just also tell you that we have an excellent regulatory structure for virtually every market. The equities, bonds, insurance. Unlike the US, we don't have multiple regulators. We have single regulators for most of these markets. The pensions market is benefiting. It's all related to this pickup in savings. Right? So that's one dimension, if you like, of the India story that attracts a lot of potential investors. The opportunity to intermediate in this process of matching savings with the demand for investment. Any questions, clarifications?